Getting lost in a video game sucks. I think we can all agree that not knowing where to go in a video game and feeling like everywhere you look is a dead end is pretty poor design. Video games at the end of the day are a way to find some enjoyment with your spare time, but if your spent time feels like you're wasting it wandering the same hallways over and over again, it will just feel frustrating as all hell. And not knowing where to go may make players feel frustrated enough to not want to put time into the game anymore. And so, because game developers actually want players to beat their games, they need to come up with ways in order to guide the player in the right direction. And this can be pulled off in all sorts of different ways. Ranging from in your face to subtle pushing, a game developer can get really creative with the ways that they do this. For better or for worse. For the sake of sounding smart and brevity, the concept of guiding a player in the right direction is more or less commonly referred to as signposting. And I want to showcase a wide variety of ways that developers might signpost in their games and see whether or not they're actually effective in doing the job in that department. So why don't we all just sit back and relax as we explore signposting in video games. Starting off as simple as it gets, I feel like objectively the most effective way to signpost a player in a video game is using waypoints and mini-maps to point players in the right direction. Skyrim is always memed on for having this little compass thing up here that always tells you where you're going, Tears of the Kingdom having the mini-map in the corner that does the exact same thing, and Fallout's Pip-Boy, which basically tells you exactly where you need to go and the most optimal pathing to get to it. But I think I can speak for everybody when I say that while it's an effective form of signposting, it is an incredibly lame way to do it. Just flat out being told where to go kinda ruins the whole point of games that are in a sprawling open world that has so much to do, so much to see. But you might want to follow that waypoint because I think there's an item there, you fucko. It just isn't fun when you're being told where to go without any form of thinking for yourself. And it's not like you can turn this feature off, because if you do, then you'd have zero clue where to go, because these games are not very good at informing the player through words on locations because they're just built around this waypoint mechanic. If I wasn't already familiar with Tears of the Kingdom's map because of Breath of the Wild and my over 200 hours in it, then I would have a very difficult time trying to find locations in the game like Rito Village because I'm not familiar with it, and the game doesn't effectively tell you where these places are, and they kind of rely on the waypoint mechanic to help you identify them. With that being said, I feel like there's one game that does a mini-map really well, and it's Far Cry 2. And it isn't because the map does less hand-holding, but instead it's because Far Cry 2 takes this simple and underwhelming form of directioning and it turns it into an enjoyable way to navigate the world. Having to physically shuffle through your maps to help you know where you need to go, and the game not always being in your face about directions, is a really cool spin on the mini-map. It encourages players to minimize their map usage because it's basically impossible to drive and you're leaving yourself vulnerable to Twitch streamers that live here or something like that. Gonna be honest, I haven't played Far Cry 2 yet. I'm getting there, man, I'm getting there. Despite the fact that I just rambled about why waypoints and maps are a disappointing form of signposting, I do want to play some devil's advocate here and provide some insight on good things that waypoints do. In your typical travel through of Skyrim to your next waypoint for your quest or whatever you're doing, you may just come across a cave. There's hundreds of caves in the game. This is going to happen a couple of times. And if your slushy, goopy brain is anything like mine, then you're gonna get a little voice in your head. And then that voice in your head becomes louder, and it goes a little something like this. Oh shit, there's a cave. I mean, it's right there. Like, it's not like it's over there. I'd have to walk over there and, that'd take a bit long. Like the cave's right there. Like, it's right there. I might as well check it out. Maybe there's some good shit there. Maybe some riches, maybe a new spell. I'm doing a shitty-ass wizard class right now. So I'm just gonna check it out. Just give it Alright, wow, I finished the cave. I got a cool new weapon. That's cool. I got some money. That's always nice. I could definitely use this spell because I fucking hate myself. And Oh, right. I got a quest I need to do. Fuck. And then when continuing your way to the waypoint, you come across an outpost with some gooners shooting arrows at you. Well, we can't have that. Time to broil some bastards. Alright, that's been taken care of, I guess. I guess I should probably go and finish my quest. And this happens very often in games like Skyrim, Tears of the Kingdom, Fallout New Vegas, all sorts of games like this. And so while the waypoint is a pretty lame way to guide a player to the right direction, it allows you to come across tons of content that you may not have found if you weren't following a waypoint. It brings you to these points of interest because you're basically just looking around at this really beautiful world with so many things that can catch your eye. Which is why it really pisses me off when a game decides to draw this stupid fucking line and that basically doesn't let you find your own path and come across these side things. Listen, I love Watch Dogs as much as the next guy, which means I think it's very mediocre, but this shit sucks. Do I really need to explain why? Alright, fine, but it's only because you're cute. When something like an arrow on the road or a bright yellow line on the minimap give a direct route telling you every turn you need to take for the most optimal pathing, then it just gets rid of any form of player input on navigation. In something like Tears of the Kingdom, if there's a mountain in your way, you as the player get to decide if you choose to climb over the mountain or go around the mountain. But in something like GTA 5, that park in your way, have no fear because look over here, this bright purple fuck you can take this specific path we mapped out just for you, so you don't have to think about anything at all. Still a great game, don't get me wrong, but this shit just still fucking... It angers me. It angers me because, like, because it's a good game, but it's so... Yo, that's crazy. Who the fuck asked? I feel like waypoints and mini-maps and shit like this are an effective solution, and while sometimes might feel lazy, there are times where it actually works quite well, encouraging the players to experience more of the game and still allow creativity. But seriously, this arrow shit, it's gotta go. I feel like the polar opposite of waypoints telling you where to go is no waypoints at all. A direct comparison to Skyrim, in that being Morrowind, is that while Skyrim has waypoints directly telling you where you need to go, Morrowind has no waypoints. Like, at all. Instead, NPCs tell you where you need to go, and you need to do the RPG thing of asking them questions, and the information that they'll give you is something like, the mushrooms you need are in a forest south of Serenity by a creek. And so you have to go south into the forest and find the creek with the mushrooms. I love this way of signposting, and it's arguably my favorite form of it. But there is a very good reason why most games, especially in an open world, don't do this anymore. Because while in other open world games, if you can build your own beautiful world that you want exactly to look like this, and then you can just have a waypoint directing the player where they need to go, in Morrowind, when you're designing the quests, you have to put so much into consideration when you're designing the world so that quests can still make sense with itself. Generally, when an NPC tells you to kill the guard at that bridge, more often than not, the bridge in question is the only bridge around. The world designers have to put in the extra effort to make sure that the directions that are given can be gotten to without much frustration. It works well, but there's so much to be taken into account when designing the world and where quest items are that it cannot be reasonably asked for these days. And I believe that because not every game can replicate the Dungeons & Dragons experience like Morrowind does. Dungeons & Dragons has the advantage of being in a world that's completely imaginary. You can create all these NPCs in your world much more than any video game ever possibly could, and the players can ask them, hey, I'm looking for this river with the mushrooms, are you familiar with it? And they will have the answer to help you because the dungeon master made this world and has the ultimate control over it. Video games just can't do this. Baldur's Gate 3 may be the closest video games probably ever will be to Dungeons & Dragons experience, but even then there isn't a way to ask every single NPCs where some locations might be. And if you do end up asking an NPC where specific items are, most of the time you'll just get a fuck you, I don't know, and then you'll just end up having sex with some green chick. So, while open world games, the most common way of directing the player is waypoints or directly telling you and having you think about it, the most common way for non-open world games is what I like to call the glorified hallway. Glorified hallway seems like it's just the wrong title, but if I'm being completely honest, it's the only title I could think of because just like a hallway, there's a very clear destination and the other side of the tomb, like in Uncharted, through the hallways of the Ishimura, triggering the traps of Bill's hideout in The Last of Us. The destination is obvious, there's no way you could miss it because it was designed this way, and well, I think it's pretty good. I have no complaints with the design choice. It's not the most creative, but not everything needs to be something super creative to be good. And that sounds like I'm just taking back what I said earlier about the waypoints, but this isn't making you feel like you're being baby. It's effective, it keeps the pacing in check. At the end of the day, running through the levels, shooting things without needing to stop everything to find the destination is a good thing. Something like Uncharted is probably the best example to describe all of this. Uncharted's gameplay loop is platforming and combat until you get to the next cutscene, and the navigation to the next area isn't complex at all. You can very much see where you need to go no matter what, but the gameplay loop is still very fun because I'm not getting caught trying to look for a very specific door that I need to go through that is hidden from the player. In Naughty Dog's next big series, The Last of Us, it's the same idea. And while I think the story is better integrated into the gameplay, at the end of the day it's still the same idea, and I think it's a very good way to guide the player without much hassle. And in the Dead Space games, while there are moments for exploration, most of the off-main path that you go to is to loot a room slightly off the main path, or in Dead Space Remake's instance, doing the side quests of the game. But even though the remake is a semi-open world, whatever the hell, it is quite easy to figure out where you need to go next, because once you grab the item you need, watch the cutscene, kill the boss or whatever, then you'll know where you'll need to go because you're grabbing that specific item for a thing that you're specifically going back to. So glorified hallway is a very good way to get the player to go from point A to point B. But what if the level was designed in a point A to point B design philosophy, but instead it allowed the player to have some freedom and creativity and still have that clear direction for players to go? This is where games like Dishonored, Prey, Thief, Gloomwood, and other games come in that make me feel like Jesus has blessed the video game industry. The way these immersive sims work is they throw you into a level with tons of different rooms to go into, tons of hidden items, guards protecting restricted areas and everything of the sort, and the end goal is to get to the end of the level or complete certain objectives and exit the way you came in. The game gives you tons of tools at your disposal, and then they just tell you, okay, now take this guy out. This direction doesn't seem like it would work well, but then once you find out what the solution is, it's pretty obvious how to get there. The big mansion, the throne room, the lighthouse, it's all quite obvious, and it's done very well when good developers are allowed to cook. These levels are not designed as some simple hallways. Instead, you can take any path, and I mean any path, to get to the end. Go through the building and climb on the lights and ledges above the guards, or alternatively, you can just climb over the entire building and get through every guard in the facility. It is absolutely incredible that a game can give so much in terms of player choice, and no matter what, it feels like good game design. When a developer puts a chain link fence up in a game like The Last of Us, it means you cannot go that way and you'll have to find an alternative. Most of the time being getting your ass handed to you by some throat suckers. But when an immersive sim puts a chain link up, it means that you as the player can choose if you want to find an alternate path or find a way to go over the fence or under the fence. I don't think it's stupid when games do The Last of Us style that let you climb over a fence unless it's a scripted sequence, or a door being blocked even though you forced block doors in the past and you can't seem to do it with this one for whatever reason. I don't think that's bad design. Because at the end of the day, the developers are making this choice for a reason. And if every game on Earth used only immersive sim design philosophies, then it'd start getting pretty stale pretty fast.
Oh, is that an ancient Tibetan ritual dagger in your pocket?
Oh, maybe I'm just happy to see you.
But I'm getting off topic. The point of an immersive sim is to actively encourage players to think outside the box and always keep your eyes on the environment around you, because you might just find yourself a way around places when you allow yourself to look for other alternatives. I would like to mention that immersive sims like Dishonored and Prey do have waypoints enabled by default, but if you're going to play them, then I highly encourage turning them off in your setting, because when you use a waypoint in a game like this, then it turns your Skyrim brain on in a game that's not meant for the Skyrim brain. But when waypoints are turned off, it turns into an amazing, unreplicatable experience. Also, could I just give a quick shout out to Prey for having the fucking coolest opening cinematic in any media ever? Just wanted to put that out there now. Just cause, man, that shit's fucking cool. A huge turnoff that many people have giving any old Resident Evil or Metroidvania a try is that it's very easy to get lost in those games. And yeah, when I first tried out classic Resident Evil games, I got frustrated because I felt like I was lost and just assumed that the game was just aged very poorly in that aspect, and eventually I put the games down. But then I got older and I grew an appreciation for different styles of games and had the motivation to give classic Resident Evil titles another try. Also, the original trilogy got released on GOG, and that made me shit and jizz myself, And this time I played it with a completely different mindset. Instead of trying to zoom through every room and not take much of what I see into consideration like I do with an FPS game, I instead would pay attention to what's going on around me. The old Resident Evil games, and I guess to a smaller scale RE2 make, aren't not directing you to certain areas, they're just asking you to pay attention to your findings and keep that in mind and remember them when you get to your next wormhole or some shit. I guess this is the part where I confess that I haven't actually beaten any of the old Resident Evil games or RE2 make. I've made decent progress in them in the past, but you know, life gets in the way, so I just played all of them for like 30 minutes to get footage for this video. I swear I want to get around to them, it's just like, you know, I got a job that isn't YouTube, I got a wife and kids. Similar thing to Metroidvanias. I'm not going to touch on these simply because I'm not the biggest fan of the genre, but in something like Hollow Knight, I don't like this game, but it's the only one in my Steam library. You're given a map, and it shows you areas that you have been to and the ones that you haven't, and you're being asked to go to the ones that you haven't explored yet. Basically, the way that these games guide the players by asking the player to explore areas that they otherwise wouldn't in other games like Dead Space or even later entries in the series like Resident Evil 4. These games appear as if you just have to guess where to go, but in reality you have to look at them differently than you would other games. Unlike games like King Quest, where they basically just say fuck you. I'm very well aware that King's Quest and other games like it were the first adventure games and were absolutely revolutionary for the industry, which is why I'll do my best not to be super duper critical of it, because there is nothing like King's Quest for King's Quest to base their design philosophies off of. But man, this game can just be frustrating as hell. All the direction that King's Quest gives you is the king is dying, so if you find all 3 magical items, then you will be crowned the new king. Then you are dropped off in front of the castle, ready to go on your King's Quest. I'm sorry, the joke was right there. You are now just on your own, exploring the areas and finding random items to try to connect as many dots as you can. Seems easy enough, it's just like classic Resident Evil, but sometimes this stuff can just feel so stupid. Getting stuck thinking for hours to figure out what to do, only to, by complete coincidence, you check some random ass rock hoping to find something just to find the one thing needed to progress. But I can forgive it because it's an old game, and the last time I played these not for this video was when I was a tiny kid gaming on my parents' MS-DOS computer or something like that, because for the longest time we never upgraded their 90s ass computer. And no, I'm not just mentioning that for no reason at all. I'm mentioning it because there's another game I played on that MS-DOS computer that I still enjoy to this day. You might have not heard of it, it's made by a pretty underground studio, and the game is called Doom. Not that Doom, the classic Doom. Doom's main form of directing the player is room after room of enemies. Generally, if you see some enemies in the room you're on the right path to something. Whether it's getting closer to the exit, flipping a switch, getting a key card, or even a secret, the enemies are what leads you into the right direction of new things. I like this directioning. It keeps my nakey, jakey, goopy goblin brain happy, and it might confuse you as to why this is in the fuck you segment of the video. That's because you can be on a roll in this game, getting key cards and killing enemies, then all of a sudden, there aren't any more enemies. And in Doom, when there are no enemies, you might as well label yourself as lost. Meaning you missed something, and now you have to run through the map aimlessly over and over again until you realize you missed a random switch that is just outside your view when you were there in the first place. And simply because of the fundamentals of the Doom formula, you just don't get informed why you aren't progressing anywhere. When they re-released Quake 2 in the Enhanced Edition, their solution to this problem was by adding an item you can activate at any point in the game that throws an arrow on your screen that leads you in the right direction. It is definitely a fix, but like I said before, I don't think this is a very good way to direct a player on a creativity standpoint, but at least you can turn it off once you know where you're going. A game that has an actual good solution to this problem is 2018's Dusk, and in general, David Szymanski's level design philosophy. Basically, the way that he designs levels is that the map will loop on itself so you never get lost because you're always going forward and you'll end up back at the door along with making the switches in the right spots that you likely won't miss. Man, if only id Software took this page out of a game that came out 25 years later. When I talked about open world games earlier and how waypoints both benefit and hurt the game, you may have noticed that I left out Elden Ring, and that's only because I think Elden Ring found a perfect middle ground. Elden Ring features no minimap and exactly 0 waypoints throughout the entire game, so how do you know where the hell you're going in the first place? As FromSoft Souls games goes, your checkpoints are bonfires, or in Elden Ring's case, Lost Graces. Something unique Elden Ring does is the flames of the Lost Grace flow in the direction of the next Lost Grace that leads you to the next main boss. And if you open up the map, it also points in that direction too. That means you can go off the main path, explore to your heart's content, find new swords, find new weapons, and do whatever the hell you want. And then when you're ready to continue on with the main game, then you can just go back to the last Lost Grace you were and follow the arrows that the game provides for you. Another game that has these hidden arrows and does it really well is actually Halo Combat Evolved. In the levels Assault on the Control Room and Two Betrayals, there are arrows built into the floors of the hallway that direct you in the right direction on where you need to go. And because Two Betrayals is effectively AOTCR but played backwards, when you get to the level, then you will know that while in AOTCR you're following where the arrows are pointing, in Two Betrayals you were following the opposite direction of the arrows. It is a bit disappointing that the level was just reused without any real change-ups, but given the absolute clusterfuck of development, I'd say that it gets a pass, and it's pretty cool that they had this little touch added that'll help out any player that might be a little bit lost. And again, anything is better than Watch Dogs with its stupid ass arrows. That shit still pisses me off. Have you ever noticed that while playing Left 4 Dead 2, you almost never find yourself struggling where to go? Probably not, because it does it so well that I didn't even notice until about a year ago when we're playing the campaigns with one of my friends, which actually gave me this video idea in the first place. I guess better late than never. But what is this super hidden subtle trick that Valve used to direct the player? I guess the best thing to call it is strategic lighting. While Left 4 Dead 2 also does the environment built into arrows like Halo CE at times, most of the time you are guided with strategically placed lights that you will naturally follow in places that you might get lost in. It's not overused where lights are placed, it doesn't negatively affect the experience like you're being babied by the developers, it just all feels natural and I like it a lot. The Half-Life games do this too, and it just works so well when it's done right, unlike any Gmod save made by a toddler just using props on GM Construct. Another game that does this really well, but to a lesser extent, is Devil May Cry. Resident Evil 4, where in more open areas, when you'd likely find yourself slicing barrels with your jank-ass knife or shooting treasures out of wells, they'd place a light by the door that you know you'd have to go to in order to progress the game. I like strategic lighting because it allows the developers to assist the players where they deem it necessary necessary without making the player feel like they're being babied around. I don't need to try being subtle here, you already know where this is going. When Resident Evil 4 released in 2023, everyone praised the ever-living hell out of it, giving it very high ratings, and it was widely considered as an amazing remake of a beloved classic. But if you're spending any time on the Bird website when this game came out, then there is no way you would have missed the yellow paint conundrum. In RE4 Remake, Capcom decided that their signposting of choice was sneezing their yellow-colored snot all over the place. There's yellow paint on ladders, there's yellow paint on walls, yellow paint on wrecking balls, yellow paint on fucking barrels, for God's sake. I think it's safe to say people were not happy with this decision. There were memes made about it, there were yellow paint video essays about it. Someone made a whole ass mod dedicated to removing all the yellow paint present in the game. And I'd argue that the complaints are very reasonable. It just feels like you're being handheld all over the place, and it feels like Capcom just doesn't trust the player's intelligence, and it felt like the game was screaming, "Hey dumbass, look over here." I stole that joke from Dumpster Man. Go check out that guy, he's really awesome. Also, it's just not very visually appealing at all. It lacks subtlety, it just feels unnatural, and sometimes just feels like this was added last minute when they realized that some of the playtesters were getting lost. The most unfortunate part about this is that it just didn't have to be this way. There are tons of games that use the yellow paint style of directioning you probably didn't notice until after RE4 Remake because it just became a huge meme. Ghost Runner uses yellow paint as a way to direct the player, but the environment is designed in a way where yellow naturally fits in with the arrows on the wall you need to run off. And for yellow paint that isn't yellow, Mirror's Edge uses red to direct with a player where they need to run and where to jump to not disrupt the pacing from running across rooftops because you just got lost. This can be done very well and has been done very well in games that came out before RE4 Make, and the fact that people started noticing it in more games after 4 Make came out is really unfortunate, because my favorite part about researching for this video was when I realized these forms of signposting for myself, when I started getting more analytical looking at signposting. And playing devil's advocate again, I don't think it's crazy for me to say that some of you guys are overreacting about the yellow paint. The amount of people I just saw whining on Twitter like some Redditor whining about a 23-year-old woman on OnlyFans is just fucking ridiculous, dude. Like, think about it. If this was absolutely necessary and they had to add a color of some sort to guide a player, I guess, like, you gotta think about it. The best color was probably yellow. Red would look too much like blood. Purple would just look weird, sorry Enigma, and fucking green, I mean, that shit's just ugly. There's a reason I get rid of it every video. But these guys on Twitter, like, complaining about this really unconsequential part of the game are just going, "Man, I'm trying to stare at Ada Wong's ass, but the yellow paint is distracting me." Like, dude, nothing on this earth could ever distract someone from looking at Ada Wong's ass. Alright, I'm being a little aggressive. Let's tone it down a little bit and get to what I'm actually trying to say. It's very clear that a lot of love was put into remaking such a beloved classic like Resident Evil 4, and it definitely shows. The amount of detail and character that this game adds that perfectly reimagines the Resident Evil 4 classic while still showing its respect to its source is unmatched by anything in the industry. Most likely what happened was Capcom was in the final stages of playtesting before this release date, and a significant amount of playtesters found themselves getting easily lost, and this is all they could do in the amount of time that they had before release. Yes, it's an unfortunate addition. Maybe they should have gotten better playtesters, and it would be nice to have a toggle button, but the yellow paint scandal very obviously didn't have any real effect on the overall quality and experience this game has. The way that developers guide the players in video games is basically an art form in of itself. From the simplest of solutions to some of the most creative choices of signposting I've ever seen that basically guides players without them even noticing that they're being guided, it's so goddamn interesting. I could have very easily listed hundreds of games that guide players incredibly well, and we would be here for hours, but I had to stop somewhere. But that shouldn't stop you from commenting some really cool examples of signposting you might have noticed in some of your favorite video games. I would actually love to hear about them, because this is one of the most interesting subjects in game design for me. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and thank you for all of the support as of late. I really love making YouTube videos, and Knowing that over 10,000 people have seen my work means the fucking world to me. So, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.